Okay, I think we can get started and people can trickle in as we get going. Thank you everyone for coming today. We're obviously going to be talking about the honors thesis through the sociology department. I want to get started by just doing a few quick introductions about who we have talking today. Carolyn, if you want to start.
Hi, everyone. I'm Carolyn. I'm one of the sociology advisors. I probably have met most of you over the last few years, but I'm the one that kind of coordinates the behind the scenes stuff for the honors thesis. And I'm definitely available to talk to students about how the honors thesis will fit into their academic plan, because everybody kind of has a different plan that they're working on. So if you have any questions, I'm your person for that.
Hi, I'm Erin Hamilton. I'm faculty professor here in the sociology department, and I have the great privilege of teaching the class, the fall and winter course that the honors students take. So I get to be kind of like a mentor to all of you and get to know you really well and watch you do this really cool job. I'm also here prior to the fall to advise students who are interested in doing a thesis, to talk about your ideas, help figure out who might be a good mentor for you in terms of substantive and methodological expertise within our department, and to navigate the process and beyond.
Hi, I'm Juliana. I'm a fourth year and I'm working on my thesis right now.
Hello, my name is Ivan Vargas. I'm also a fourth year student currently in the thesis seminar.
And I'm Nishi. I'm also in the thesis program as well, and I'm also one of the sociology peer advisors. Okay, great. So first, Carolyn is going to start by giving just kind of a basic overview of what the thesis is and how it would look if you decide to participate.
Okay, so as far as the honors thesis, I know you've probably had, or at least some of you have probably had some conversations already regarding this, but in general, it's basically an opportunity for you to do your own research. It's something that will take a significant amount of time for you to do. You put a lot of time into this project, but it's a very rewarding project. I've talked to a lot of students who are really glad that they did this program. Essentially, you'll pick a topic that you want to research, and you'll start talking to a faculty. You'll find a faculty mentor and have conversations with them about your topic and how you might go about doing your research. And there's lots of different things that students have done over the years as far as research topics. There is a list of some previous ones on the website if you wanted to check those out. So you can really pick whatever is really something that resonates with you and something you're passionate about. Once you kind of have everything together, you do a proposal, and then that will be done over the summer, and you send that in, and then you would be able to register for some honors thesis units. You'll register for 194 HA in the fall and 194 HB in the winter, which Professor Hamilton will be teaching both of those. A lot of times students will still be working on their thesis in the spring. It's ideal if you can, work toward getting it done by the end of winter quarter, but it is not uncommon for students to still be working on it in spring quarter. So if that's the case, there's no class in spring quarter, but we can sometimes give you independent study units in spring quarter, so that way you can continue to work on it, and those independent study units can count toward your 12 units for full-time status and financial aid and things like that. So if you're thinking about doing this, you can meet with me and I can kind of help you figure out your academic plan and whether that would make sense for you to do that or not, and kind of plan out your last year. So make sure that you have time to do all of this. And then as far as some of the other things that's under the thesis bullet there, where it talks about like high and highest honors, for our college, it's a little complicated, but for someone to graduate with honors, they have to meet a certain GPA, and that GPA changes year to year because it's based off of a percentage of GPAs for the College of Letters and Sciences. So, and it also depends how many units you have. So even that's a little bit complicated of a calculation, but if you meet that requirement and you do an honors thesis on top of that, you can graduate with highest honors based on the caliber of your thesis. And so that's something to think about as well. If you don't meet the honors GPA requirement, you can't graduate with highest honors, but you can still do the honors thesis. It can still be something that you talk about when you're applying to grad school or when you're applying for a job or things like that. So it's still very rewarding experience and still something worth doing for a lot of students, even if they don't graduate with high honors. There's also opportunities for you to present your research. The URC Undergraduate Research Center, they have a conference every year. And so any UC Davis student can apply to present there. And so a lot of our students have done that. There's also ASA, American Sociological Association. We've had students present there as well. So there's lots of opportunity to kind of get this out there and things like that. It's also a really good opportunity for you to kind of build a stronger relationship with some of our faculty, because you will have a faculty mentor, and that can sometimes help you think about your goals in the future and how this fits in, as well as maybe a letter of recommendation that you might need for grad school and things like that. So there's a lot of benefits to doing an honors thesis. And, maybe Nishi and Ivan and Juliana can kind of speak to, what they're getting from the program when they get to their point when they're talking. And if you have more questions about this, I'd be happy to answer, but that's pretty much the basic overview of the program.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Carolyn. Feel free to drop questions in the chat. We're gonna have time at the end for Q&A, but if you don't want to forget, you can type it in the chat. Professor Hamilton, do you want to kind of talk about maybe what the classes look like and then what your role would be for a student who is in the thesis program?
Sure. Yeah. So the class meets once a week in the fall and the winter, and it's a very casual, largely unstructured time for us to provide support to one another as a group of people going through, and for me to guide you through the thesis process. So we spend a lot of time checking in, sort of like you would with on a one-on-one basis, except you're checking in with the group. And the process of checking in is, updating each other on what you've been working on, talking through any problems that you're having, and then ultimately trying to advance your analysis and your work on the thesis on kind of a steady, ongoing, regular basis. And so the class provides structure to your process, kind of anchoring you within a cohort of students who are doing the same thing and allowing you to get regular feedback from me, from your classmates, thesis mates on the process. I also spend a lot of time meeting with students outside of class, both before and after the fall winter quarter periods. So I do one-on-one mentoring to address all sorts of questions related to the thesis. At this stage in the process, I'm happy to meet with any of you who want to talk more about your ideas and who might be a good mentor, or how to go about figuring out what you want to do. I meet with students in the summer to get ready for the fall quarter. And I meet with students after the winter is over, as you're wrapping up the thesis, if you're still working on it or applying to grad school, or students have, as Carolyn mentioned, not just presented at the URC conference, but also at other academic conferences, as well as publishing their work. And I'm here as a support to you at all stages, well beyond these 2 quarters in which we meet regularly. Yeah, I wanted to add to what Caroline said, that there are these wonderful benefits from the program, but I think the most kind of important benefit is just the tremendous learning that students experience. It's so unique compared to the kind of learning that you get in a large sociology classroom, because the work of kind of solving problems on your own and driving your own questions and answers is very different from taking classes where you're directed by a syllabus and a professor who has particular ideas about what you should learn. And so I think that there's just this unique opportunity to really become more of an independent thinker and problem solver through this process.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Professor Hamilton. So next we are going to talk to our current thesis students. That includes me, Ivan, and Juliana. And maybe we'll start with Juliana. If you just want to briefly talk about what your thesis is, why you decided to do it, and then maybe how did you find your mentor, and then, you'll probably briefly touch on the other three while you're talking about that.
Yeah, for sure. So hi, I'm Juliana again. My thesis is about gender and family in recent children's films. So like I watched 7 children's movies, some rewatched, and was looking at gender behavior, gender expression, gender norms and roles, and how those, like what messages those tell audiences. And then as I was watching those, noticed a lot of stuff and asked, like, this interested this because I heard about this and then came to session last year. I sort of idea in my that I was interested in gender and media, and especially media, because I had taken I took it was women's studies before, or gender studies class, and that was a film class. And my final paper for that, I looked at gender in movies. Like one of the most just like experiences I had right class. And so I was interested in getting to expand on that and like to really interested in.
You're kind of breaking up. Would it be possible to take your
Oh,
AirPods out? I think that might be the issue.
yes. Okay.
Okay.
Perfect.
Is it better?
Yes.
Okay. So yeah, I took a class and had a final paper about gender in movies and was just super interested in the topic and wanted to keep working on that. And then the way I found my mentor was I I looked through all the faculty on the sociology website and like read their like specializations, their little bio information to look for someone who like had a specialization in gender because for me like no professor I had had already really stood out to me. Um, or like people I had that taught like my social gender courses were um, not sociology faculty, so I had to find someone by looking online. And I did struggle a bit with finding my mentor because I also kind of got to that step later in the summer. So I recommend if you like are ready to do it, go for getting that set up right now. But then I had reached out to a couple people and they weren't able to be my mentor. And so then I emailed Caroline and she told me that I should check with Dr. Tefsecker, who I hadn't had before. But then I sent her an email, explained the thesis, what I was interested in, and she said yes. So then that's how I got my mentor. Um, and yeah, I think this is a really good opportunity if you have a topic that you might have thought about in another class or something that you actually were like really interested in. Um, and you just want to keep going into that. And I recommend it.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Juliana. Ivan, do you wanna talk a little bit about your thesis?
Yeah, so my project is focused on Latina, Latino, and Latinx and Hispanic identity. And so as you may have noticed, like there's a lot of variety within the Latina, Latino identity. And so just based on my own lived experiences, I just kind of started to wonder about like what this identity really meant. And like, I even had a question to myself, like, when did I become Latino, And like I couldn't answer that. And so it was just something that was just a part of my day-to-day life and like my home community. And so, I always knew that I wanted to do something like in that realm of like Latino Hispanic identity or like immigration. Um, and so I guess I kind of diverged, but like essentially I'm just trying to understand identity in relationship to like the UC Davis campus and like students coming from, diverse communities and coming here to a new diverse community with different demographics and how that shapes people's perspective of their own identity. And so in terms of like my mentor, like I always knew that I wanted to do something in the realm of this identity and immigration. And so similar to Juliana, like I looked to see which faculty did work in the field and taught classes in the area. And so my mentor is Dr. Valle. And so she does work directly related to those two fields of Latino identity as well as immigration. And so I decided that I wanted to take her upper division immigration course. And like it's not necessary to have taken a class with a professor to work with them, but for me, I just wanted to be able to learn from her and like kind of like I guess demonstrate my own capacity as a student so that I can already start to build a relationship with her and connect with her. And so when I reached out, like I just like we kind of knew each other, and so I just let her know that like I was in her class and like this is what I'm interested in. And so we met to discuss like some of my ideas, and we kind of just went to expand from there. And so the reason why I decided to do a thesis is because I was very interested in pursuing a graduate program. And so if you're interested in pursuing a graduate program or that's what you want to do, I would say that doing a thesis is kind of mandatory, honestly, because it'll serve as your writing sample when you apply to different programs. And this will kind of guarantee 2 letters of rec, which would be your primary mentor as well as Dr. Hamilton. And I think depending on the school, you need like 2 or 3 letters of recommendation. And so this will allow you to kind of like build those relationships with those faculty so that they can get to know you and your skills so that they can write a more quality letter. Um, and so I kind of already discussed how I found my mentor, but I will say that, in the very beginning, when I first started like thinking about research and like making connections with faculty, like I was very nervous. Like I was very like shy, and like I used to not go to office hours as well because I guess I just felt like I don't know, I felt intimidated. But I think that like now through my experience, like I understand that like your professors, the faculty, like they're humans just like you, and more times than not, they're very interested in speaking with you and sharing their experiences and learning about your interest. And so, even if you feel a little bit nervous, like that's natural. But just like go talk to them. And once you do, you'll realize like, oh, this isn't so bad, and then from there you can start speaking to like many professors and like honestly, I recommend like not only discussing your ideas in terms of like what you want to study and how it relates to what they're working on and like your goals. But once you get more serious about like identifying a mentor, like I would suggest even discussing like expectations of like what they expect from you, like as their mentee, and like what you would expect from them as your mentor in terms of like the kind of support that you're looking for, like how often you want to meet, whether that's every other week or once a month, things like that. Just to make sure that there's a good alignment in that sense. Because like, mentors, like professors, they're busy and students too. So it's good to find like a good match, like not just content wise, but in terms of the mentorship. Um, and then in terms of thinking about your topic, I would say you can never really start too early. And so like I'm sure like all of you just through being here, like you've already thought about topics, right? Like you already have interest in certain things. Like that's why you're studying sociology, that's why you're here. And so really you can just start from like taking a class with a professor and just like really resonating with something or thinking about an idea and like wondering like like I wonder if anyone's ever thought about this, and then you can see and maybe they have, maybe they haven't. And so you can just kind of start from there. And so I would say like again, you can never really start too early. And so it's good to like have those conversations like as soon as you really start to have those ideas or just keep notes for yourself, and just be open to like change because research is a very dynamic process. And so initially like I was doing not through the thesis program itself, but like previously I was working on like an immigration topic, and I saw myself like continuing to work like in immigration, but just based on like the time frame of a thesis, I knew that like accessing like the immigration, like, or sorry, not immigration, but like, accessing like undocumented populations is a little bit more challenging, like with the IRB process and things like this. And so I chose to choose a population that's readily accessible, so UC Davis students. And so for me, that was just more of like a practical approach, a decision that I made for my research. And so like, that's something to consider as well. But like if you do want to work with like a more I guess like protected population, like you would just want to start working on that sooner in terms of like IRB, things like that. And so you can never start working too soon. Like even if like you just set like 30 minutes or an hour aside like each week, starting next week, like that's pretty good, just like, what am I interested in? Like who do I want to talk to? Like things like this. Um, yeah, and so I would say finally it's a good opportunity to learn the research process and see like if this is something that you really want to continue to do and pursue in the future, especially if you're interested in a grad program, because it's a very serious investment of your time and your energy. And so this will give you a taste of what that would look like.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ivan. I think Juliana and Ivan covered most of it, so I'll just talk really briefly. My thesis is about welfare and specifically looking at the Temporary Assistance for Needy Families program, TANF, and basically using historical legislative bills and documents, understanding the spending patterns of states and the variation in states about their TANF block grant. And I'm specifically doing a case study on Texas and Arizona and comparing the ways that they're similar and different from basically the United States in terms of how they spend their TANF money. Um, and I was super on the fence about doing a thesis or not doing a thesis. I had started kind of researching over the summer, like preliminarily, I guess. And I had a few conversations with Professor Hamilton about doing a thesis or not doing a thesis. And eventually I did decide to do it. I think I was really not sure whether or not research was for me. And I also wasn't really sure if I wanted to do a grad program or if I wanted to get like an entry-level job in research in the social sciences. I was just a lot of uncertainty, which made it difficult for me to figure out if I wanted to commit to a thesis or not. But I think at the end of the day, I talked to quite a few professors and a lot of them gave me the same advice. They were like, this is a good opportunity to really figure it out. Like, yes, there's a class and there's a grade and you get a grade at the end of it and you have to complete it, but it's also definitely much lower stakes than if you were doing research at a grad program level for the first time. And through this process, I think I've actually realized that I really enjoy research and it is something that I want to pursue. So I think that was one of my big takeaways from this program. Um, and I found my mentor. My mentor is Professor Drew Halfman, or Hoffman. I keep saying it wrong. But he has been great throughout the process. I just emailed him over the summer and kind of like Ivan and Juliana, I just sent him a quick email about what I wanted to do my topic on. And I had him before I took both of his classes that he teaches, and I really enjoyed the content of both of them. So I knew that he knew a lot about welfare. And it just worked out that he was available to be my mentor. And we've had very good and open communication. He's been very, very, very helpful and reliable as a mentor. And so I got really lucky with him. But I think if you are able to find a professor or take a class with a professor that you just really click with, even if they don't end up being your mentor, they are probably a great resource for you to just talk to about the fact that you're thinking about a thesis, and maybe they can refer you or point you in the direction of another professor who could support you. So if you're not sure about a professor, that is a great way to find one, is to talk to a professor you currently have that you have a connection with and go from there. Um, and yeah, I think beyond just doing the thesis itself, the thesis class has been really, really helpful for me. It's nice to get to sit in a room and talk to a bunch of SOC students who are not doing exactly the same thing as you, but are in the same boat as you. I know the SOC classes can tend to be really big, so it's nice to not only have a really small class, like our class this year is 10 people, but to also get to have like meaningful conversation with them as well throughout the course of fall and winter quarter. Okay, great. So I think we kind of talked about this too, but I just want to briefly talk about what your summer, fall, winter, and spring look like as a thesis student. So we all kind of follow a similar trajectory. Over summer, you kind of do your preliminary research and you try and solidify your topic as much as you can. Like Ivan was saying, it's open to change. A lot of change does happen in your thesis. But summer is kind of just narrowing down a topic and then meeting with your mentor once or twice to just solidify that's what you want to do. And then also turning in your research proposal, which is due August 31st. And then fall is basically figuring out how you want to go about collecting data for your project, whether that be interviews, surveys, analyzing historical data. In Juliana's case, she's picking movies to watch, and then kind of starting that process. So if you're doing interviews or surveys, getting those interviews started, sending out your survey. For me, it was like collecting historical data. For Juliana, it was like watching her movies, and then kind of starting to compile your data. And then winter and spring is for analyzing that data and then actually writing your thesis. So putting together your lit review, analyzing the data you've gathered in the fall and probably a little bit into winter. And then hopefully being done by spring. Best if you're done by winter, but that's really not the case for a lot of us this year, at least in the program. So probably more like spring. And then in spring, even though there's not a class, I know my mentor is open to working with me in the spring, and most mentors are, to continue meeting with you weekly or bi-weekly or whatever it is, to get your thesis done by like around April. And I think that's kind of everything. Carolyn, Professor Hamilton, is there anything you guys wanted to add before we move to Q&A?
I think you explained that really well, so I think I'm good.
Me too.
Okay, awesome. Before we go to Q&A, quick plug, we are actually hiring in the sociology department for peer advisors. Both of our peer advisors, so me and Alyssa, the other advisor, are both graduating this year. So we are looking to fill 2 spots for SOC peer advisors. Since you guys are here and showing an interest in the honors thesis, that means you guys are definitely driven and high achieving students. And that's exactly the type of people we would love to hire in our office. So if you're interested, you can scan the QR code to apply. And applications are due next Monday. So not this coming Monday, but the Monday after. So yeah, that was just a quick plug. But now we have time for Q&A. Are there any questions? I can stop sharing now so we can all see each other. Any questions about for any students who are doing the thesis, or for Professor Hamilton or Carolyn about the kind of the logistics of a thesis? Carolyn, I'll give this one to you. Can you go over the 3-page proposal?
Yes, let me pull up that on our website real quick. If you just give me a second. Okay, I'm gonna share this with you all. So on our webpage, it does kind of describe the undergraduate honors thesis, eligibility, preparing, etc. And there's a section here for the research proposal. So if you take a look at this, these are the 3 things that you will address in the research proposal. And we do have a couple samples from some former students if you want to take a look at those and use this as kind of an example. But basically, you're going to describe what your research topic is and, you know, what you're trying to find out, what your question is. That's the first part. And then maybe your preliminary plans on how you're going to conduct research, what kinds of methods you're going to use, etc. Sometimes that changes over time. So, you know, this is just kind of your proposal to make sure you're thinking about it and getting, you know, getting on the same page with your mentor, but it could change and that's okay. And then some books or articles, you know, that you're going to read over the summer to kind of get started on thinking about your research. So that's kind of the general idea. It's not like there's a super structure to it that if, you know, it has to be like a certain way for your mentor to approve it, but it's just basically to get your ideas on paper. And then, you know, you'll turn that in through this link here. But before you turn it in, you actually will go over it with your mentor to make sure, you know, you're both on the same page and it's all looking good. And if, you know, they say it's all looking good, then you can go ahead and turn it in. And then at that point, that's when you would get the CRN to register for the class and everything. Hopefully that answered your question. I don't know if you had a more specific question.
Seems like that was answered. Are there any other questions? Feel free to unmute yourself or type in the chat if you don't want to speak out loud.
I was kind of wondering how the classes work. Like it said we get credit towards our degree, but I was just wondering how that's kind of distributed. Like I'm gonna talk to an advisor after this because I do plan on doing this, but I was just wondering if you guys had like some insight.
Caroline, do you have an answer to Zoe's question?
Make sure I'm understanding. So you're asking like how the class itself is structured, or
No, like the credit for the class itself.
oh, how
Like
the credits work.
yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
sorry,
yeah.
I misunderstood. So you take 194 HA, which is a 4-unit class. You do that in the fall, and you take 194 HB, which is a 4-unit class in the winter. For most of you, we can apply your 194 HA to your major requirement. So unless you've already got all your major requirements done or something like that, we should find a way to apply it to that. The 194 HB is just additional units. They are upper division units, counting toward your 64 upper division you need and things like that. So those can still count. It does count, 12 units for full-time status, financial aid, all of that. But usually we just apply 4 units to the major. For some of you, you may already have like your elective done or things like that. And so we might be able to apply it to a different requirement. So what you'll want to do at some point, if you're, seriously thinking about doing the honors thesis, go ahead and make an appointment with me and I can kind of go over like how it would apply specifically to what you have left in your requirements for your major, and we can kind of figure that out. And then, like I said, for some of you taking SOC 199 units in spring, typically we would allow like 4 for that. And so the purpose of that is so that if you're going to be a full-time student and need 12 units, you can take 4 units of 199 and then just 2 additional classes for the additional 8 units. So that way you're not trying to take 12 units of coursework plus still working on your thesis. So unless you are over in units or something like that, or you're doing a double major and need to take other classes and things, hopefully you'll only be taking 12 units total with the honors thesis your spring quarter. Does that answer your question a little bit better?
Yes, thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
All right. Anybody else? Any other questions before we wrap it up?
I have a quick question for the current thesis students. What would you say has been the hardest part of conducting your research so far? And do you have any advice on how to navigate certain challenges on your own end or versus when to bring it up with a mentor in class or something like that?
Yeah, that's definitely a packed question. Juliana, Ivan, do you each want to like maybe briefly talk about your experience with troubles that you've encountered on the road?
Yeah, I can go first. For me, since I kind of avoided a lot of problems that would come up with interviews and things since I'm looking at movies. So for me, the hardest challenge was just like motivating myself to do work, because this is, I mean, it's not like other classes. There's not like a due date where you need to turn something in by. Um, so I just had to kind of like work through getting used to like giving myself a due date and actually sticking to it, and like planning out what I would do on certain days was helpful for me, instead of like, oh, this week I need to work on my thesis for like an afternoon on Tuesday. I'd be like, oh, on Tuesday from 2 to 4, I'm going to read 3 articles. And then that was like that helped me a lot when I was getting stuck with just like getting the work done. But yeah, it's hard to sort of shift to having to like structure your own work, but you'll like figure out strategies what works for you.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Juliana. Ivan, do you want to maybe talk about how you differentiate what problems you can kind of deal with on your own versus what you talk about during class versus what you would bring up with like your mentor?
Yeah, so First of all, I just want to second what Juliana said. I think definitely like time management and prioritizing. I mean, that's definitely something like individual, but you can like I know I've talked to like both Dr. Hamilton and my personal mentor, Dr. Valle, as well about like their methods for time management and things like that, because everyone has like a different kind of like workflow. And so I would say in terms of like figuring out for me, it was kind of like there's certain things that were more like I guess like the formal process, like for example, like doing the IRB and like filling out like all that documentation. That was something that like I have no prior experience in. So it was really helpful to speak to like my mentors about this. And like I recall Dr. Hamilton like really guided me through that. Like at one point, like I think we were on Zoom and she was just like helping me like fill out the application, and she shared some like sample like submissions that she had done that I could use as a reference in submitting my own. And so other things too, like, I'm doing like interviews. And so that's also something that I talked to Dr. Valle about because she has conducted many interviews, right? And so, I think just kind of like considering like the expertise of your mentors and like their experience and like really leveraging that in terms of like those questions you might have. And then in terms of like check-ins with the class, I think just being mindful of like what your peers are working on. And so like sometimes like you might be experiencing similar problems or like you might be in similar phases of the process. And so, it can be helpful to like mention those things or like ask like, hey, like I know you're also doing interviews, like how'd you do this? Or like, I know you're also advertising for your study, like things like that, that you can like work through with your peers as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ivan. Professor Hamilton, do you want to maybe talk about briefly what the struggles you've seen students go through like that are pretty common and what advice you have for them?
Give me a minute, Nishi. Can you answer for?
Yes, I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
That's okay. I just want to give a good answer.
Yeah. I can talk a little bit about my experience too. Yeah, I think what Juliana and Ivan both said are super true. I think some of the hardest things that you will encounter in your thesis is that self-pacing. Because again, fall quarter, at the end of winter quarter at least, or at the end of winter and spring, your final thing that you turn in is like your actual thesis. But at the end of fall quarter, you get a grade for the class by being in the class and participating in the class. So it's very much like self-paced how you end up scheduling out your fall quarter. And so it can be really difficult to set goals that far in the future. And I think it's also important to be open to change. I think that really stressed me out a lot fall quarter was my thesis was changing a lot. My research methods was changing a lot. And so I would have to like read a bunch of articles and then none of them would apply because my research question had changed and I had to pivot. And that was pretty frustrating. But I think definitely being okay with the fact that your project is going to look probably completely different than what you thought it was going to look like when you first turned in that proposal is probably one of the hardest things I've had to grapple with so far. But my mentor has been really, really good about letting me know that it's so normal and that he goes through the same thing when he does his own research. And it's really helpful to talk to your professors about this because they have experience, years and years of experience of encountering exactly the same hurdles you are. So I think I talk to my mentor about most of the things that I'm struggling with, and he usually has some kind of solution that I can implement.
That's awesome, Nishi. I mean, I think, Ivan said something about like having multiple mentors and knowing, what different people can bring you. And I think that thinking of mentorship as like a network of supports that includes your peers and faculty who are, or instructors who are teaching different classes, and kind of thinking about you as a researcher who, is doing an independent project, but can draw from a lot of different resources and supports around you at UC Davis is a really good strategy to avoid, the mentor who's limited and human, as Ivan mentioned, and some of the kind of challenges that come up around motivation or structure or different issues that, both Nishi, all three of the the current thesis writers mentioned. I'll mention one thing that I've noticed that hasn't been mentioned, which is kind of a perfectionism that I think a lot of thesis students have, which can be sometimes discouraging when the things change, as Nishi mentioned, or it's not going as quickly, or you have to do a lot of work to revise and perfect, and so we do talk about strategies for kind of minimizing the kind of barriers and obstacles that perfectionism presents, but I think the best kind of advice I would give from the get-go is just to be aware of what expectations you have for yourself, and to separate those expectations from the process.
Awesome. Thank you so much for all that advice. Is there anything else, any other final questions before we call it quits? Oh, yeah. Candace, you can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hi. I just had a quick question. I'm a first year student and I'm really interested in doing this later on in college. And I was wondering if anyone has any tips on maybe not getting started right now, but just what to do to continue being interested in any certain experiences or any certain action items I should do so I can be ready for this process.
Carolyn, I don't know if you have any advice for that first before I turn it to others.
I mean, I would say one thing I would recommend is definitely talking to faculty early on. Like, and when I say talking, not necessarily about this, right away or whatever, but, getting to know faculty. And one of the things that I think a lot of our students sometimes struggle with is finding a mentor. And sometimes it's because you've taken a lot of courses that maybe our grad students have taught or things like that, and they're not eligible to be your mentor. So even though you know, got some relationships going there, which is good, they can't actually be your mentor. So maybe going to other people's office hours or things like that, like Ivan was mentioning, look on the website and who has some general interests that you're interested in, and maybe start those relationships a little bit early, because that's going to make it so much easier when you get to be a junior and you're trying to find that mentor. You already have some relationships to start with, to kind of build on, versus you've never talked to anybody before and then you're kind of starting from square one, and that makes it a little harder. Not impossible, but it's harder when you don't know people. So I would say I would start talking to people early if you can. And I was going to say one other thing, something that Professor Hamilton had mentioned about having like multiple mentors and things like that. Another common question I get is, does my faculty mentor have to be a sociology faculty mentor? And the answer to that is yes, they do, but that doesn't mean that you couldn't have multiple mentors. So for example, a couple of years ago, we had a student who was researching something that had to do with child development. And so they had Jacob Hibble as their sociology faculty mentor, but they also had somebody in the human development department that was working with them as well. And so they met regularly with both of those people throughout the time that they did the thesis. So it's perfectly fine if you want to pull another faculty member from another department. As long as your sociology faculty member is okay with that, you can pull somebody else in and get their feedback, but you do need to have a sociology faculty be your primary mentor.
Yeah.
Thank you for the information.
Yeah. And then in terms of, I think, thinking about it as like a first year and as your time goes on at Davis, I would probably say focus, like think about what you're enjoying in your classes and try to take like more classes based on that. So I knew like at the end of my second year, I took a social policy class where we talked a lot about welfare, and I knew that that was something that like immediately piqued my interest. So I tried to take a few more social classes that kind of focused on that topic. And those all ended up being with Professor Hoffman, and then he ended up being my advisor. So I would say like look out when you are learning about things in your different social classes for things that kind of interest you, and then try to maybe like take some classes focused on that topic. And then you'll probably have like a good idea of whether it's something that you feel like you could dedicate a year of your life to learn more about.
So I actually want to just second what they said. And I would say just, I think it's really awesome that you're here already getting information. I think that's a really good sign. We love to see that. And so I actually just included some links in the chat. And so this is helpful for everyone, actually. I wish that I was aware of these sooner. And so the top one is the planned courses. And so it's going to be a little bit outdated at this point, but like for the, following school year, I recommend finding that. I just look up like UC Davis sociology planned courses and then the year. And so that'll show you like each quarter which courses are being offered and who's teaching them. And that's very, very useful because it allows you to be more intentional in terms of like which classes you're taking and which professors you're taking them with. And I say that because like let's say that there's a certain researcher that you're interested in working with, like you could benefit a lot from like taking their class that they primarily focus on, right? So again, like for me, like I took like an upper division migration like studies class with Dr. Valle, which is like one of her specialties. And so that was really cool for me. And so sometimes like when you're in schedule builder, like I'm sure you've seen it where it'll just say like the staff or like to be determined. And you're like, what does that mean? But like if you look at the planned courses, I think that's like up to date completely. So you can see who's going to be teaching that. And so you can like more like intentionally plan out your quarters. And then also the second link is just like the general catalog. So you can just learn more about like what each course is. And so I would say just think about like what subjects you're interested in and like who are the main like faculty within those. And like I don't know if there are any other like research programs that like you might be eligible for, but like for example, I know that I was like in the OES research fellowship. And that was the summer going into my third year. And so I don't know, maybe like Caroline might be a good resource for that, or like the undergraduate research center, just to see like what programs you might be eligible for. I know there's another one, it's like I think it's like MMP or something like that. And it's like a mentorship program to connect undergraduates with graduate students. And so you can have a graduate student mentor who, can like share their experiences and like guide you based on like their current knowledge. So I would say just look for like programs you might be eligible for and just try to be very intentional. Like don't stress over it, but it's good that you're thinking about it, right? Like that definitely gives you an edge.
Yeah, that was all really, really good advice. I couldn't have said it better. Is there anything else? I think we're gonna wrap up pretty soon, but I want to leave time if anyone has some like last questions or anything before what we call it. Okay, awesome. Thank you all for coming today. This is going to be recorded and it'll be uploaded to our YouTube channel, so you guys can view it there if you want to go back and look at any of the information that we talked about today. In addition, Carolyn is always here if you want to talk about more of the logistics side. I have drop-ins that are on the SOC website if you want to talk more about the program and my personal experience as well. And Professor Hamilton, I know, also offered up some of her office hours if you want to discuss kind of what you're thinking and maybe talking a little bit more about your research topic and your interests, if you want to do that before you get started. Just a reminder, the proposal is due August 31st. So you have all the rest of this year and summer too to think about what you want to do. And then don't forget, if you're interested, to apply to the social peer advising position as well. But that is all. You are free to go. Have a great weekend, everyone.
Thank you.
Great job, Naishi. Thank you so much.
Thank you guys for coming. I
Thank you,
appreciate you guys
Ivan and
talking
Juliana.
about-
Great job.
Yeah, I appreciate you guys coming and talking about all your experiences.
Yeah, thank you for hosting us and having this event.
Yeah, thanks,
Yeah, take
Caroline.
care.
Too.
Have a nice
Thank
weekend.
you.
I'll see you guys on Monday.
Bye. See you Monday.
Did I stop the recording? Oh.